On the Democratic side of the aisle, we have a presidential candidate joining us via Skype. He is Mayor Wayne Messam. He's a 2020 Democratic presidential candidate, and we are glad to have him. Welcome, Mayor Wayne.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing well.
Good morning, Mayor Wayne. Thank you so much for joining us. So let's talk about the decision to run for president, especially since there's a really huge field right now.
Well, being a mayor in one of Florida's largest cities, we've dealt with a lot of progressive issues. Being the son of immigrants, I'm a person who has a personal story that's living the American dream, and I'm running for president because I feel that hardworking Americans across this country, that American dream is slipping away from them. And I want to be their champion to fight for advocacy issues like access to health care, making our streets free from gun violence and mass shootings, as well as being able to advocate for hardworking Americans so they can have one job to take care of their families. And I released a groundbreaking program to forgive $1.5 trillion in outstanding student loan debts. These are the issues that everyday Americans are facing. So I'm very excited to be in this race. My campaign is a little over 7 weeks old, and fighting for my opportunity to get my word out across the country.
Well, and Mayor, speaking of that, so you've not yet qualified for the Democratic debates. What is your plan to qualify?
Well, we're making a lot of headway in that. In fact, we're supposed to, according to the DNC, have national polling in early states. I'm already polling. I've met one of those requirements in terms of 3 of those states and continue to push my way forward. But I've faced these odds all my life. I'm growing up in a rural community in South Florida, being a football player. We're going to Florida State University. I wasn't expected to do that. I even had an opportunity to play in the NFL briefly. Wasn't expected to do that. When I won and became the mayor of the first black mayor of the city of Miramar, I wasn't expected to do that. So I know these odds are there in front of me, but I've been fighting these odds all my life. And I know that the more Americans that see me and hear my message, the more support I'm getting. So I'm very excited about bringing this platform to the American people because change cannot wait.
In Florida, there's been a lot of discussion about criminal justice reform, and the state of Florida voters voted for Amendment 4, which basically gives back voting rights to a person who served time and were formerly incarcerated. Can you talk about what your stance is in terms of criminal justice reform, and particularly as someone who is a Black American, understanding just how disproportionately the criminal justice system affects people of color, Black people, Latinx people? What are your stances on those issues?
Well, it was a travesty in this current Florida legislative session. Basically, the approval of a poll tax that was handed down from Tallahassee. For the voters of Florida spoke, and they feel that once you've served your time and paid your debt to society, you should be re-engaged in our voting process. So this basically usurps that process. And it's a travesty. And it just goes to show how broken this system is from a political standpoint. In terms of my position in criminal justice reform, obviously being African American is something that I'm not in denial. We know that it's an unequal process. There's unfair prosecution across the board. And I will be a president who will ensure that we have equity and equality across the process so that everyone is basically judged and fared out according to the merits of their character. And I think that's what the promise of America is. And that's what my campaign is based upon, that we are all American and that we should all have free access to the benefits and the rights of being an American.
The specific policy proposals that you have to address that inequality? I know that some people have focused on voting, some people have focused on bail reform. Can you just name a couple of those things?
Well, voting rights is very important because that is the easiest and the most accessible process to have a voice in this country. Voting should be a matter of, it should be automatic. So, for example, I will propose that you should not have to register to vote. The minute you turn 18, you're eligible. How novel is that? why isn't the first Tuesday in November for general elections across this country and across America in various states, that it's not an actual national holiday? When you think about when the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965, if you contemplate this, there perhaps was more rights and access to voting in 1965 than there is today. States across this country are putting in more restrictive ways to put barriers into registering to vote, to maintaining your voting status. And we should not be a country that is putting up barriers, but instead providing access for the rights to vote. So those are two quick and easy policy proposals that I would advocate as president.
So, Mayor, I want to ask about impeachment. I know you've said that you support impeachment, yet the Washington Post ABC polling found that by a 56 to 37% margin, that's almost 20 points, Americans don't want impeachment.
Well, that's not a hallmark of my campaign. I was asked the question, should the president be impeached based off the information that was released through the redacted Mueller report. I believe that Congress should be able to have its constitutional right to oversee the executive branch. And if the facts support that Congress should take the acts of impeachment based off the facts that have been revealed, then so be it. But what I'm focusing on what hardworking Americans see as challenges. We have Americans who don't have access to health care. We have Americans who have to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. I'm fighting for those Americans. In the city of Miramar, I passed the living wage. I banned the box in terms of questions asked if you've been arrested. In the city of Miramar, we have one of the fastest growing economies in the country. We're actually beating out China for jobs, opposed to companies leaving our city to go to China when they've been courted. So I want to speak about the specific experiences I've been as a mayor in the city of Miramar and how we can transfer that experience to the American people. Because the question is a mayor qualified to be president? But my question is what does a Washington experience have to do with meeting the needs of the American people? Because what Americans do say is that they know that that Washington is broken, and that is why this election is wide open right now.
Well, certainly that helped sweep Donald Trump to the presidency by saying that Washington was broken for sure. Mayor, you mentioned that you had spent some time in the NFL, and I'd like to get your take on the, what's happening with the political activism on the field. Do you think that it's become too polarized? I mean, what's your take on this?
No, as a former athlete myself, it's a unique ability to have a platform to be able to bring a voice to those who don't have a voice. I support activism in your own peaceful way. And I know it's been blown out of proportion, but if someone wants to shed light on injustices in our country by kneeling, I think they should have the freedom of speech and the right to be able to do that. So I think that it's an awesome platform. You've had athletes like Muhammad Ali, and you think about the Olympics, where there's a platform to be able to shed light on injustices. And I think that anyone who wants to muzzle the voice of, whether it's an athlete or an average everyday American that wants to make this country a more perfect union, needs to check themselves to see why would they want to stop or attenuate the ability of someone to be able to bring or shed light on issues of injustices in this country.
And Mayor, were you ever political while you were in the game?
Well, yes, a little known story about my experience at Florida State University when I was a campus. Along with being a football player at Florida State University, I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and our local chapter at Florida State partnered with the Black Student Union to sponsor a trip to the Million Man March in D.C. That was led by Minister Louis Farrakhan. I mean, I'm not a follower of Minister Farrakhan, but I supported that effort because it was a day of atonement for African American males across this country. So our fraternity supported that event, and we brought a couple of buses to Tallahassee. But what that was going to do was to cause me to miss practice on our return back from Washington. And I did not know how that would put my scholarship in jeopardy, but I met with Coach Bobby Bowden, told him about my intent to be involved in this political or activism for our campus in Washington, D.C. And I was allowed to go. So it's I've been fighting these fights for a very long time, and that's why I continue to put that burden on my back, because I want to be the voice for those who don't have a voice, and that's why I'm in this race.
Mayor, you know, there's another inspiring aspect of your story, and again, it's you know, being the child of immigrants from Jamaica. When we talk about immigration reform in this country, obviously there's a personal connection for you. What do you think it would mean to have comprehensive immigration reform that is both humane and just, and also makes sense for the country?
Well, you know, that's what's so wonderful about this country. And it's no doubt on why so many immigrants want to be here in America, because of the promise of the American dream. And I think that as a country, we need to deal with immigration head on. We need comprehensive immigration reform. We have over 11 million undocumented individuals in this country that are living in the shadows. And we need to provide some form of pathway to citizenship for those individuals. And I really think that a comprehensive immigration legislation that will not only deal with those that are undocumented, we have our DACA recipients and individuals under TPS that are here in this country. And I think that we need to be, we shouldn't be building walls. We should be building bridges to access. And I'm a product of that. That is why my parents left everything behind to come here to this country, so that I can live the American dream. And I am living that American dream. And I want to provide the same opportunities for others. Not only immigrants who wish to become citizens here in this country, but for Americans that are already here through birthright, who are not experiencing the American dream. So it's something I'm very passionate about. In fact, in the city of Miramar, we actually have an ICE facility in our city. And because of our limited ability as a municipality who does not have powers to usurp or to preempt federal operations, it has been a travesty since this president has come into office. We have a public safety issue and crisis going on right here in our city because of the number of individuals who have to check in at that facility. And it's been so deplorable. And as you stated, it's a very inhumane way to enforce our immigration policies and laws.
You go, I just want to ask you to sum up one policy proposal for immigration, so that way people can walk away knowing exactly what you would do to change the system.
Well, I would push for a comprehensive immigration reform. We have to deal with the 11 million plus individuals that are here living in the shadows, that this country is benefiting from economically, as well as DACA recipients and TPS. And what I will say and speak truth to power is that if we were serious about immigration, we would have our tax laws to have the most punitive penalties on corporations that employ undocumented individuals. And we don't, because we know that we are exploiting their presence here, but they're not getting the benefit of their productivity here. So that would be something that I would look closely at and would push, that we would force corporations or penalize them for the employment of individuals, to force the issue, because we know that it will have an impact on us economically.
Isn't that what I would argue what the president just proposed in terms of his immigration plan? He said he wants them to be more based on employment and skills, as opposed to family or chain migration, as he says it. Especially if you look at Canada and New Zealand and these other countries, a lot of other countries have a much narrower provision for families, and they're more skills-based or companies-based. Am I hearing bipartisanship?
No, well, I would work with anyone, but I'm not advocating what the president is advocating for. He is using this as a veil to hide behind the real issues of what's going on. When you are selectively saying what immigrants can come into this country based off of, subjective markers, I don't think that should be the primary way to basically put a score on individuals. How do you put a score on life? Because if you was to score the efforts of a contract sugarcane cutter, which was my father. And if you was to put a score on a cook who was my mother, who used to be in those same hot South Florida fields feeding these sugarcane cutters, they would probably rank very low in terms of what they would contribute. But you know what? My parents helped build this country, and they gave birth to a son who went on to be a scholarship football player, to play in the NFL, to be a business owner, to have one of the fastest growing construction companies in Florida, to be a mayor of a major city in the state of Florida, and to be in discussion to be president. You know, that
Sure.
opportunity,
Well, Mayor,
I would not
Mayor,
even
you're
be
certainly
on this YouTube.
you're certainly a testament to their legacy. Absolutely, Mayor. One last question I have for you. Just you mentioned unifying the country and the right to protest. I think everyone agrees with the right to freedom of speech in this country. But what would you do to unify the country? And I'm saying this as someone. My brother was a police officer, and when a lot of these protests were happening on the field, he felt dehumanized. He felt like he was someone who was willing to put his life on the line for people of all colors, and he felt like he wasn't being treated fairly by a lot of what was happening in the country and in the press and on social media. So for people like my brother and myself, our families, like, how would you bring us together so that we can unify beyond what's happening in the divisiveness in this country?
And just to jump in, I actually don't see the protests as divisive. So, my father is a veteran, an Army veteran, and he actually supports the freedom of speech and the football players who are on the field who are exercising that. So
sure, I support freedom of speech.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not saying they shouldn't have the freedom of speech. I'm saying but given that their reaction has been polarizing, that my brother is feeling in this way that he's being threatened, I'm not saying we should curtail freedom of speech. I guess I'm asking, how can we unify the country is what I'm saying.
Well, Wayne,
I think it's like self, as well as you all in the media, is to really be able to call out those individuals who are trying to muddy the waters. Basically, the whole situation was boiled down to a few bad officers that made bad decisions in killing unarmed Black individuals. To speak out against that act is not to support individuals like your brother and like your father who defended this country. And I think we have to call out those individuals. It's not a zero-sum game. I support individuals in their right for free speech. We have to deal with injustices in this country. And to deal with injustice does not take away from the valor of those who defend us every day. As a mayor of a major police agency in the city of Miramar, I have the wonderful opportunity to swear in our officers. We celebrate our officers. There are way more good officers that do so much for our country. There's so many veterans, so many active duty military individuals that fight day in and day out to keep us safe, and we celebrate that. So we should not let anyone muddy the water, and we should rid ourselves of anyone that does any injustice to anyone, and we should be free to speak about that. So that is my position on that.
That was a great case study right here of unifying different differences of opinions. Thank you so much, Mayor Wayne Messam, for joining us, and we look forward to following your campaign.
And what I would ask your listening audience is to visit wayne4usa.com and be one of my 65,000 donors that I need to get on the debate stage. If you want to hear the issues that I'm talking about, visit my website, wayne4usa.com, and be one of my donors, and I'll speak truth to power in a way that other candidates won't or are not willing to speak on.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it.